I think the key here is that when one starts to understand, like, gosh, I'm really drawn to this thing, that when you understand that, one can start taking steps to move away from it. Now, the problem with this whole dopamine thing in the context of relationship is that early on, it's incredibly intoxicating to the point where oftentimes people don't realize that they're veering so hard, right? That and this is where the power of friends comes in very handy. This is also where we can honestly say that the power of complete and total disclosure about relationship to friend or therapist is really healthy. If you're saying like, I've seen this with some of my male friends. I have female friends too, but most of my friends just happen to be male at this stage of life. That's just kind of my surroundings. And I get the friend that's super excited about somebody, and they'll tell you this story about this, say, and there was this crazy thing. She did this crazy thing, and they get kind of wild-eyed and like, that doesn't sound good. And he's like excited about it. I'm like, okay, this is his drug, right? It's uncertainty, it's excitement. And it follows a very predictable pattern where in 3 to 6 months, it's him complaining that she's crazy or that the relationship is a mess. Here's I think the takeaway for relationships, not just at the beginning, not just in the middle. We can talk about the end in a minute if there is one, to have an awareness where if you sense too much excitement in yourself or too much anticipation of how great someone is, I'm not saying don't fall in love, but be very cautious about the extremes of dopamine. Be very wary about the thing that makes you feel incredible. And I say this with some trepidation because I myself, love. But there is this element where it is a bit of a drug, right? It's this thing because it's always about more. And if you really want the relationship, if you want good clarity on the relationship and you want it to last, there has to be a tempering of that. And I don't mean playing aloof. I don't mean canceling things last minute. I don't mean playing any kind of games with the dopamine reward prediction error thing. What I mean is just being aware that chemical state really is a what comes up goes down. And it also puts tremendous demand on the other person. I think the key of any good relationship is to be able to toggle back and forth, ideally in together, through these more dopaminergic, like novelty, excitement, and then the more like really getting joy out of just being together, the more serotonergic stuff, like the just like, wow, the sweetness, the incredible, like the cocoon, and missing one another is super healthy. Also, remember, addiction is a progressive narrowing of the things that bring us pleasure, making sure that we continue to derive excitement from other things in life, even when we're falling in love. The concept of the muse and the concept of in a new relationship, we feel kind of indestructible and we can do anything in life and feeling so inspired. You see this
happy, joyful, excited.
Oh, I've seen this in family members. Also, they're like working out again and you're like, wow, they're using it. But the problem is it's all anchored, it's all tethered to this relationship, and the relationship goes and then the rest of the stuff goes too. So again, being able to access these motivational reward systems in a bunch of contexts, so critical. And then of course, we see the opposite too. I have a lot of friends who've been married for a long time, and they're like, we never do anything anymore. They're only in that kind of serotonergic.
You're going to say we never do it anymore.
So
never do it anymore.
And sex is a huge, we know one thing for sure, which is that all of us are here because either in a dish or eventually in a body, sperm met egg. And that's just the reality. And that whole process that we call sex, sexual reproduction, is strongly anchored to what's called the autonomic arousal system, whereby there's excitement but it can't be too much excitement. It's got to be calm, because if it's too much excitement, it actually inhibits the sexual response. That, believe it or not, the orgasm response in both men and women is driven by the stress system of the body, but it has this positive valence. We say it's a lot of dopamine. And then why? Because then afterwards, whenever that happens to be, there's a return to below baseline levels of energy. We think that the Just So story about this is that it's likely so that people will exchange smells to pair bond, right? Because pair bonding is pretty vital to human partnership. And obviously people can have sex not just to produce and raise young, but then, so the whole like seesawing back and forth, and then it repeats, right? At whatever frequency that couple is for them. But that whole process is one in which dopamine is strongly released in anticipation and during sex, and then afterwards it plummets. And there's another molecule called prolactin, which skyrockets. Prolactin actually sets the refractory period in which, at least for males, sex can't happen again. And what are the other things that induce prolactin in males and females? Well, child rearing. It's linked to the lactation process.
Oh, wow.
Like the coziness thing is not dopaminergic. It's prolactin. It's basically driven by prolactin, oxytocin, and serotonin. So this seesawing back and forth is at the core of who we are. It's at the core of how we got here. All our parents, one way or another, went through this process. I always try and think of the exceptions. I'm always teased that I think of every qualifier. I suppose in vitro fertilization, the mother and the father went through this process in separate areas of the world, but nonetheless, each one went through the process in more standard natural reproduction, as we call it. They took place presumably in the same place. This is how we got here. This is how we work. And I think the learning to toggle back and forth between excitement and anticipation, but never hitting that absolute extreme excitement, is a very useful thing. Don't ever hit the ceiling, ever. In that way, you maintain motivation, you maintain excitement, and learn how to toggle back and forth.